This is a recording of the life of Riley. J.P. Riley and May Stock were married on April 27, 1926. My father was 19 years old and my mother was 18. He had a job at Westwood Lumber Mill working the night shift in Westwood, which was 12 miles from Susanville, California. My mother's family lived in Susanville, and they owned a house with a two-story barn and turned the second story into an apartment for my parents to live in. I was born on April 13, 1927. My father made a bet that they would not have a baby the first year of the marriage. He lost the bet by 2 weeks. Heidi Kuntz had a poker card room in downtown Susanville, and my father would spend his spare time playing poker there. My parents bought a 1928 Model A Ford and moved into a home in Westwood. Westwood was a company-owned town, and the lumber company owned all of the houses, grocery store, that included clothing, hardware, and necessary utilities. The houses were small and not painted because it was cheaper for the company to replace the lumber instead of painting the houses. The houses did not have garages, and my father built one for their car. The Great Depression, the United States paper money was based on the gold standard, which greatly reduced the amount of paper money that the government could have in circulation, and there was a short supply of money available to the lumber mill. Part of the wages were in script, IOU, that could be used to buy items from the company-owned stores. My father liked to play poker in Heidi's boardroom, and since he was working the late night shift, he would play poker instead of sleeping. He was caught sleeping on the job in 1932 and was fired. There were no jobs available in the area. My dad learned a valuable lesson, and from then on he was never late for work or missed a day's work the rest of his life. The government had started Boulder Dam, now called Hoover Dam, that was near Las Vegas. My dad left my mother and me with her parents in Susanville, and was lucky enough to get a job working on the diversion channels at Boulder Dam. Las Vegas was a small railroad town, and we lived in a tent in the desert just outside of Las Vegas. The town was crowded with men trying to get jobs, and the local park was full of people sleeping, and they all had very little money. Heidi Kuntz had closed his card room in Susanville and opened a card room in Las Vegas. Hobbs, the other partner in Heidi and Dad's lumber business, also got a job at Boulder Dam. Hobbs said that he slept in the park when he was trying to get a job, and one night somebody took his shoes off his feet and left him barefooted. Hobbs said that he had enough money to buy another pair and hoped that whoever took them got some good out of them. The government was in the process of building the entire town of Boulder City closer to Boulder Dam, The town consisted of a mess hall that anybody could eat in, including families. They even made lunches for the workers who lived in the building and had small apartments. They also built duplexes for workers with families to live in. Schools in a complete downtown town with a drugstore, restaurant, and a few other stores. There was a guarded gate on the only road going in and out of the town, and people going into town had to show the identification to the guard that they lived in the town and or had a visitor's permit. Black or non-white people were not allowed. We were lucky enough to get a duplex in Boulder City shortly after moving into Las Vegas. I enjoyed living in Boulder City because the facilities were the best we had ever had. During the summer months, I would go barefooted everywhere, and when school started, I had to wear shoes, which is difficult for me to get used to. I had a German police dog that went everywhere with me. He would walk me to school yard, go home, but would be waiting for me at the schoolyard at noon recesses and when the school let out. When I did something wrong and my father was going to scold me, he had to put the dog outside. My mother got a job as a waitress in the Boulder City public restaurant. I met a black boy on the street and was playing with him. Black people were not allowed in the Boulder City, and the police stopped us, and my mother had to leave her job to pick me up. She lost her job because she told them she was single when she got the job. Due to the shortage of jobs, they had a rule of one job per family. My father's right ankle and foot was crushed when a big boulder fell out of the ceiling of the tunnel that he was working in and caught his right leg when it rolled by him. He was lucky because the doctor was able to rebuild it, but he had to wear boots that had a special brace on it, and he was given $1,050 compensation and a job as a security agent at the dam site. We also moved out of Boulder City into a small house in Las Vegas. The post office was also acted as a bank, and the $1,050 was put there because they also paid 1% interest per year, and my father swore that the money would not be spent unless it was a dire emergency. My father worked as a security guard at night, and my mother worked as a shield in the bingo parlor in Las Vegas. When she won a bingo game, she kept the money, which was the only payment she received. The rest of her life, she always liked to play bingo, and always selected a bingo card that had certain numbers on it. I was allowed to roam free around Las Vegas, including swimming in the public swimming pool. I sold a Las Vegas newspaper on the streets. My father's job ended in mid-1934, and they loaded up our 1928 Ford and moved to Oakland, California. My mother's oldest brother, William Stopp, and his family had a large two-story house, and we stayed with them until we moved into an apartment close to the Lake Merritt Park. My father's right leg had healed and he was able to remove the special boots and got a job working on the highway and railroad tunnel system to the Oakland-San Francisco Bay Bridge. My mother's oldest brother, William Stopp, we call him B, had a permanent job working as a mechanic on the railroad equipment and was able to buy their house, which originally cost $90,000 for $8,000. My house was in an expensive area that looked over Lake Merritt Park. He was involved in all the politics and was a staunch Republican that believed that Herbert Hoover was a great president. I really enjoyed living in our apartment. I got my first bicycle and fun playing with other children in the park. I had complete freedom and could go to the Oakland baseball field and watch the league baseball play. My father painted our 1928 Ford and changed it from a black car to a green car, and he did it with a paintbrush and sold it for $25, and they bought a 1935 Ford sedan. My sister Marilyn was born on December 3rd, 1935. On Christmas Eve, my mother gave me 25 cents and sent me down to the nearby Christmas tree lots to buy a tree that I carried home. We didn't have any decorations, but for the first time we had a tree, and I found the gift under the tree for me on Christmas morning. My father's job shifted across the bay to building the tunnels for the Golden Gate Bridge, and we moved to a house in Larkspur. The house was on the top of a hill, and to get from where the car was parked, we had to walk up a 100 steps with an area halfway up to rest. I really enjoyed the house because it was at the end of the street and next to the park. The park was in the little valley surrounded by trees. During the week, there were very few people in the park, but on weekends it was full of people. On Saturday night, they had a dance floor out in the open air with live music, and the park was full of people from all over the area. The dance lasted until the wee hours of the morning. I got an education watching young couples walking into the dark area of the park near our house in the wee hours of the morning. I always wanted to live in Larkspur with my family, but my job was too far away to commute, and I couldn't get a good job in the area. My father's job was finished in mid-1936, and there were no jobs available in the area, and we moved back to Susanville and lived with my mother's family for a short while. My father got a job falling trees in the woods near Chester, and off of that, what was called Deer Creek Road that eventually ended up in Chico, California. It was summertime, and we lived in a tent in a small park where several families also lived in tents, and the men were also falling trees. My brother's cousin, Ed Forrest, was my father's partner falling trees, and also had a tent there. We got water from a well, and there was a mineral spring close by. Quite often, my parents got large chunks of ice from Chester and used it to make a large tub of soda pop using Kool-Aid and mineral water. The taste of the drink was better than any soft drink you could buy. When school started in September, I went to live with my mother's family in Susanville. My mother's parents moved back to Susanville in the fall and rented a house in the Italian area of Susanville. Approximately one half of the population of Susanville was Italian, and they lived in an area near the Fruit Growers Lumber Mill with their own grocery and clothing stores. They talked to each other in the Italian language, including me when I was in their homes. My father was able to work, including driving logging trucks, until mid-1937. A friend of my father knew a family that owned a large ranch a few miles outside of Napa, and they wanted to remove all the trees on the ranch. The rancher supplied all the equipment, and the workers convert the trees into firewood, and it could be taken to and sold to firewood lots in Napa. The workers kept the money for their wages. My parents' cousin Ed Forrest and Ed's father, Uncle George Forrest, took the offer. Living there had to be hard for my mother because the ranch owner's wife was the only one she had to talk to, and she only got to town every 2 weeks when they took a truckload of firewood to sell. Money was hard to get, and my Uncle George was excited because they always bought him a gallon of wine. A few days before Christmas, Mother drove my sister and me to be with her family on Christmas. On the way there, she parked the car in the woods where there was a lot of mistletoe, olive plants, and we gathered as many as we could and then took them to my grandparents' house. The next day, my mother made a lot of wreaths out of the holly plants and had me sell them for 10 cents by going to the houses all over Susanville. I made $3, and my mother used the money to buy my sister a tricycle for Christmas. My grandmother always made a special type of candy on Christmas Eve. It was fun to watch her make it. It was an art, the way she made it. No one was ever allowed to taste it until Christmas Day. Then she handed out a few pieces to each person. It was a special Christmas I will always remember. Early in 1938, the work was finished at the ranch, and my father could not find out any work anywhere. There was a need for workers at some of the farms in Oregon. My mother's sister Bertie Handsaker and family were renting a large house in Sutter, California, and we all moved into their house. My father left us there with a car and stole a ride on a freight train to Oregon. The train went through Redding, California, and my father stopped there to find out when they were going to hire people to work at Shasta Dam. Heine Kuntz had already opened the card room there. My father got the information he wanted and also won $35 that he sent to my mother. My father got a job on a ranch that lasted until the end of August. My cousin Ed Forrest also moved to a house with 3 of his friends. The fruit and almond orchards were all harvested by hand, and they hired whole families to pick the fruit. Our first job was picking prunes, and we were paid 5 cents per box. Each family is given an area to harvest, and we would pull up the box, mark the family's assigned number on the box, and stack the boxes up. We started picking early in the morning and worked about 10 hours, stopping at noon for a very short lunch and rest. I averaged 28 boxes a day. The families were paid in cash at the end of the day. My mother kept the money, and I think it was used to pay for our room and board to the Handsakers. Picking fruit only lasted a few days at each orchard, and a lot of families were looking for work. The book Grapes of Wrath was based on facts, not fiction. Walter Handsaker, my mother's sister Bertie's brother, owned several almond orchards. One of them was near the house. He liked the work I had done picking fruit, and his orchard near the house had already been picked, but there were loose almonds to be behind around the trees, and he gave me the job of picking them up. I was paid 25 cents per burlap bag, which weighed about 50 pounds. I was given a metal bucket to put the nuts in. I would empty the bucket into the bag. I would leave the bag at the orchard for him to pick up. I averaged one bag in the morning and a bag in the afternoon. I cleaned the orchard up in a week and was paid with a check. In the local store, gas station, and a bar, my mother was with me as I cashed the check there. My mother gave me a nickel for a soda pop, and she said she would take care of the rest of my money. When they harvested almond orchards, the workers would spread a large sheet of canvas all around the tree, and they would shake the trees by hand and use a rubber sledgehammer, and the nuts fall off the tree. Almonds would fall onto the canvas, and some of the almonds would end up on the ground. Father's brother paid me 5 cents an hour to pick up those loose almonds and put them onto the canvas and make sure there were no almonds left on the ground when they flew to the next tree. This was done at the end of August. My father's work in Oregon was finished, and he came back when I was working in the almond orchard. And in the morning, my parents drove out to the almond orchard to watch me. My parents and Walter's brother and his wife also showed up in their car. That afternoon, we all went to a small lake that was around 10 feet deep and went skinny swimming. My father rode the train back from Oregon and stopped in Reading and found out that they were starting to hire people to work on Shasta Dam. 2 days later, he got back on the freight train and went back to Reading. I started school in Sutter the 1st of September in the 7th grade. Luckily, it only lasted 2 weeks because the kids were not friendly, and I had several fist fights going to or coming from school. My father started working at Shasta Dam. Reading was a small railroad town with very few houses and facilities for people to live in. Heine Coots lived in the back of the car room, but he all set up a tent just outside the city limits on the highway 99 going to the dam site that he had lived in when he was trying to start up his car room. He kept the tent so that he could let his friends use it while they looked for work. My father was working swing shifts, 4 p.m. to 12 p.m., and had made arrangements with Heine for us to use the tent. We arrived in Reading after dark on a Friday, and when my mother went into the tent, somebody was already sleeping in it. We drove back to Heine's car room. Heine forgot we were coming and immediately got his car, and we followed him. Heine put the man and his stuff in his car, and at that moment the Great Depression was over for the Riley family. When we moved to Shasta Dam and Reading was a small railroad town which tripled in size almost overnight. And there was all bare ground from between the dam site and Reading. There was no places for anybody to live or anything else. We lived in a tent for a little over 18 months on a bluff overlooking Reading, where they allowed people to build tents and to supply water. And then my folks bought a place in Enterprise, which was a small cabin and what have you. And my dad rebuilt that and turned it into a 2-bedroom house. But one thing that I learned, if I wanted anything, I had to earn it myself. So I was 11 years old when we moved there to Reading, and I immediately found ways of making money by selling newspapers and delivering newspapers and working at their various jobs all around the area. And so I always had a job, and was able to make money and so forth. When I was 13 years old, I was allowed to drive a car all around the area out in the boondocks away from the main highway. And so I could drive a car very well. And because of my dad's experience and everything else, I was able to, during the summertime when school was out, I was able to work at the dam site. And the first time was it was in the mess hall there, and I was 14 years old, and I was working the mess hall, making ice and washing windows and doing all the odd jobs you do. And one of the main things I had to do was to drive a pickup truck all around the area, delivering ice and cold water and so forth to the workers. And so I thought here it was pretty good. I was 14 years old and driving the pickup all over the place at the dam site. And then in the following year, since I was an old man at 15, I worked at the dam site as a welder's helper on the penstock, what they call a penstock, which was the big pipes that fed the water into the electrical equipment and generating the electrical generators. And also I worked as a blacksmith's helper there, and that was helping because they sharpened all of the equipment they used for drilling holes and so forth in the ground. That job I had there, I was really wealthy because 1941, when I worked at that, was the World War II started, and there were shorter workers, so we worked 7 days a week and got paid extra time and a half money on Saturdays and Sundays. So after 7 days there, I'd get a check for $50, which in those days was a fortune, because I was able to buy my first car for $200, so I had to work 4 weeks to get the $200 to buy my first car, which was a 1935 Chevrolet. But anyway, I earned a lot of experience and so forth there. And I also worked after school. I worked selling. The main job I did after school was selling shoes in the shoe stores. Sold the shoes on Saturday, which was a job I used when I helped put myself through college after I got out of the Navy. And I was 17 years old when I joined the Navy, because I just graduated from high school in 1944, and I joined the Navy. I guess you might say the history's pretty well taken care of, since I ended up graduating from there and getting married and getting graduated and had a baby girl, and all my experience I had growing up and so forth and working and having to earn my own money really paid off in the long run. 1951, because that was the first thing we did was buy a house, because all of my life I had moving from tents and so forth, and there were two things I wanted to do. Number one, make sure I had a house that I owned. Well, your mother was with me on that too, and then I didn't want to move, because of all the moving I did when I was going to school, so I wanted to live in one place, and so anyway, have a good time. Bye.